So one of the things that we figured out is you figured out the hard way. I figured out actually very similarly. Is that the two-party system is going to suppress any real change,
Oh, yeah.
and that's what has to get altered if we're going to have a shot. But it does feel like, unfortunately, the sums of money are so large at this point that if you're going to have a shot, you need someone with a giant bankroll.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So next question for you, Stephen. What surprised you the most? Like of what you were told?
They were incredibly, I mean, I learned so much. I mean, the money, like, we all know money's involved in politics, but like I interviewed with Andrew the first time. I said, okay, like what are the most important days in a campaign? And he was like, first quarterly fundraising report, second quarterly fundraising report, third quarterly fundraising report. But I mean, learning that there's a ex-Broadway actor who teaches aspiring politicians how to talk to people like they're human beings and gives them like exercises to do that. When debates happen, the candidates are given 5 pieces of scrap paper and they write their answers in triangle forms. Like these little details to me, like the actual machinery of how this happens, the craft of it really, I just found totally fascinating. I mean, that's the basically we wanted a fast flowing plot that kept all that incredible detail that Andrew and his staff gave me about the actual workings of the process. But I've been doing the next Civil War for a long time. It's not like I was surprised about American decline, but after like 15 minutes conversation with Andrew and his guys, I was like, oh, it's way worse than I thought. Way worse. That did surprise me.
Every day I find out something that is worse than I thought, like every day, like for me, it's been like the Israel-Palestine issue. And every day I get, it's worse and worse for me as a, recovering Zionist. But like we learn as we go. And the idea is to do better as you know better. You know what I mean? Like that's the idea. But some of the stuff that goes on is ridiculous. And I did Andrew, I read your book and I also read Zach's book. So a lot of the information that you're referring to, I read about. So I am familiar with it, but it's filthy. It's filthy.
Yeah. It's a dirty game. I mean, you've lived it too, Jen. One thing I admire about you is that you're still trying to make generational change, still trying to make good things happen. I mean, that like is the same with me. And you and I are unusual. I mean, one of my pet peeves is that there are folks who have run, who have vast resources, let's say, and they didn't stick around after they, like it didn't work out. And a lot of them got shivved by the system. But they didn't say to themselves, like, how am I going to, get the system back? Instead, they were like, screw it. Didn't work out for me. I'm out. And I think a lot of it is because you subject yourself to a certain sort of public effacement and treatment that if you were really, really rich, you're just really not used to at all. I mean, everyone just kisses your ass in business, in the business world. And then in the public eye, you just get like, oh my gosh, all these people are yelling at me all the time. And then they just throw down and we're like, forget it. I'll just go back to doing things where everyone has to treat me like I'm the end all be all. And that's something that is going to keep us from making progress. So kudos to you for sticking around, Jen. I'm trying to do the same.
Well, you are, but this is the difference. You didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to run for office. You had a thought, you had a mission, you had something to bring to the table that you thought was a worthwhile venture, that is a worthwhile venture. And so it wasn't about you, it was about the concept and the movement, which is what it is for me. So people that run just because they want that job, then when they're done running, there is nothing there. Whereas like for me, and I also support the idea of service-based campaigning so that you create this service community momentum that we got people involved that normally aren't politically active. And then you just sort of keep community involvement going. But that's only when people are like organically involved. And it isn't just, oh, I want that job.
It is, I think, very interesting the way that this book was written. As I said, it's written not in the reverse, but almost in like the Pulp Fiction kind of way, where multiple stories are happening at one time and they're kind of intersecting in a lot of different directions. And I know obviously there is the campaign component. Everyone's on edge, especially when things heat up, and especially if there's money and you can make things happen. But the character for me that really stands out when you talk about why people become so nihilistic about politics is the character of Balfour, which represents the consultant / operative class of politics.
Yeah.
And that to me is what, when people see that, when people realize that we're literally going to spend X amount of time focused on whether or not Representative Bowman intentionally pulled a fire alarm, because that's the most important thing in the world. That's the consultant class at its finest. Neera Tanden is the archetype of that particular person, but they're everywhere. And I think you really hit it very effectively in this book that I think people should really recognize, is that even when things are going straight to hell, there's always going to be somebody with their hand out saying, give me a few $100,000. I'll make this person look like a turd, because at the end of the day, it is the broken system that is reflective. I mean, when Jen ran for Congress, there were those types of people. Granted, it wasn't at that scale, but there were still those people who
we
were
have
like,
the microcosm.
Oh, we're going to make her suffer. We're going to make her look bad. And they did the same to you. And then there were times where you ran and you may have said something that people may not have agreed with, but they didn't want to have an honest conversation about why they disagreed with you. You see, that to me, that is the loathsome end of the political arena, that people, once they get a taste of it, the average person does not want anything to do with it going forward. And I think you really hit that effectively in the book.
Well, thank you for that. It's one reason why it's been important to me to continue to have like a community and voice and podcast the same way you guys are doing, is because you realize that the only way out is to build our own machines. Like, there's going to be a machine that tries to defend those within the machine over and over again. And the discontent with the machinery is just going up and up. Now, unfortunately, the discontent, I think, is going to wind up manifesting itself in really negative and destructive ways. And what you'd like to do is have it be channeled in positive ways. But there are certainly this consultant operative class that are right there in the machine, ready to do its bidding and get paid a lot, and really do not care at all about the public.
I couldn't believe they were real. I mean, it was the kind of thing I was the kind of thing where I was like, oh, this is something you get from the movies or something like this. And then when I met them, I was like, oh my God, like about the 17th time I was talking to Zach and Andrew, and they, we're building this plot together. And Andrew's like, and they kept saying like, well, we unload the book then, or they would unload the book after this, or so. And I kept being like, when you say unload the book, and that would mean like bring out the negative stuff, I was like, is there an actual book? And they were like, oh yeah, there's an actual book written about every major American politician, and it's got. And I said, can I see one? And it's everything bad they've ever done, right? And I'm like, I'm 47. What would a book about? I have lived a completely private life. What would a book about me look like? I mean, I shudder to think. I think any reasonable human being could get to the point where it's like, you could write a book about anyone, right? Like, so it is incredibly destructive. And I think one thing that Andrew and I really share is this notion that the problem is not really people; it's these incentives that are built into this system that just ruins people. And that's kind of why we wrote it as a novel. Because it means that, because in a novel you see how people are changed by situations, and how like they're bad guys and good guys, but it doesn't really matter when the system drives everyone into these terrible incentives.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.